Welcome to Planetterrian Daily, episode 42, coming to you on April 7th, 2026. Here's your science and health briefing. The stories that are quietly reshaping how we understand materials, deep time, our planet's climate, and even the nature of awareness itself. Let's begin with something that feels almost science fiction practical. Engineers have built a memory chip that keeps working at 700 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead and far beyond what any conventional silicon device can tolerate. The team stacked unusual combinations of materials to create a device that doesn't just store data under extreme heat, but can actually perform calculations while it's doing so. What makes the work especially interesting is that the key heat-resistant mechanism at the atomic level was partly uncovered by accident during routine testing. The researchers noticed the stack kept functioning long after they expected it to fail. This isn't simply another incremental improvement in thermal tolerance. It's a demonstration that computation itself can be made compatible with environments we used to think would destroy any electronics. The implications stretch across several frontiers. Imagine reliable AI hardware inside aerospace vehicles that have to survive re-entry temperatures, sensors that can operate deep inside geothermal wells where drills encounter molten rock conditions, or control systems for next-generation nuclear reactors that run at much higher efficiencies. Of course, moving from a carefully controlled lab prototype to something that can be manufactured reliably at scale remains a substantial engineering challenge, but the fundamental breakthrough already changes the boundary conditions we thought were fixed. One question worth sitting with is how devices that can shrug off temperatures rivaling molten lava might quietly shift where and how we choose to deploy artificial intelligence, perhaps pushing smarter systems into places we've historically kept dumb out of necessity. While this work pushes the limits of what machines can endure, other researchers have been rewriting the timeline of how complex life itself first appeared on Earth, showing that the story of animals is older and more gradual than textbooks once suggested. In southwest China, paleontologists have uncovered fossils dating back more than 540 million years that preserve an unexpected diversity of early animal forms. These specimens include clear relatives of starfish, various worm groups, and creatures that sit on the lineage leading to vertebrates, all appearing in the late Ediacaran period, well before the famous Cambrian explosion. What stands out is how many of the major animal body plans that still define life today were already taking shape millions of years earlier than most researchers had previously believed. The site has been described by the team as a lost world of early animal life, offering a rare window into ecosystems that existed right on the cusp of that dramatic burst of complexity. Rather than picturing the Cambrian as a sudden creative explosion appearing out of nowhere, the new fossils suggest a more gradual transition in which important lineages were already established and experimenting with different architectures. This pushes back the origin of complex multicellular animals by a significant margin and forces us to reconsider the environmental or ecological triggers that allowed those body plans to flourish. It's a reminder that the history of life is rarely as tidy as the chapter headings in our textbooks. Each new, exceptionally preserved site has the power to stretch or compress entire chapters of evolutionary time. The fossils don't just fill in blanks, they change the rhythm we thought the story followed. Speaking of deep time and planetary scale changes, new research is also refining our picture of the forces that drove Earth's climate into icehouse conditions millions of years later. For decades, many scientists pointed to the opening of ocean gateways around Antarctica as the primary reason the continent became locked in ice. The idea was that once those passages were clear, a powerful circumpolar current could isolate the continent thermally and help plunge the planet into a much colder state. But fresh modeling and geological work shows the story is more nuanced. The strong Antarctic circumpolar current actually required a precise alignment of shifting continents and powerful atmospheric winds working together, not simply the absence of land barriers. That alignment helped strengthen the current enough to pull substantial amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, amplifying the cooling effect and contributing to the transition toward a permanently glaciated Antarctica. The study offers a more integrated view than earlier models that focused mainly on the physical opening of Drake Passage and the Tasman Gateway. Both massive geologic rearrangements and changes in atmospheric circulation played essential, intertwined roles. Understanding these combined factors doesn't just satisfy historical curiosity, It sharpens our grasp of how planetary systems interact to drive long-term climate shifts, something that feels increasingly relevant as we watch our own carbon cycle change at unprecedented speed. From those ancient climate transitions to today's environmental challenges, a careful study from Los Angeles illustrates how difficult it can be to truly remediate industrial legacies once they've settled into neighborhoods. Researchers at the University of California, Irvine examined residential yards around a former battery smelter in southeast Los Angeles years after major cleanup efforts had been completed. What they found was sobering. Even after substantial remediation, dangerous lead levels persist in the majority of the yards tested. The data revealed that 70% of the sampled properties still exceeded current safety thresholds for residential soil. The work stands out because it was heavily informed by community-driven science. Local residents played an active role in shaping the questions, collecting samples, and ensuring the study reflected the realities families face every day. These findings highlight significant gaps between the way we currently declare a site clean and the long-term protection that people living nearby actually need. Contamination in soil doesn't always behave the way regulatory models predict. It can migrate, remain bound in unexpected chemical forms, or re-emerge under changing conditions. The study raises uncomfortable but necessary questions about how we monitor and manage legacy industrial sites over decades, not just in the immediate aftermath of a cleanup project. It's a reminder that environmental justice isn't solved with a single remediation effort. It requires sustained attention and better tools. Staying with the theme of targeted interventions, a different kind of precision is emerging in cancer treatment through clever engineering at the University of Mississippi. There, researchers have developed implantable devices called spanlastics, essentially 3D-printed structures that can be placed directly at a tumor site to release medication in a controlled, localized way. In early experiments, these printed platforms successfully delivered drugs that killed cancer cells while appearing to spare much of the surrounding healthy tissue, potentially reducing the harsh systemic side effects that make traditional chemotherapy so difficult for patients. The approach takes advantage of additive manufacturing to create tiny, specialized tools tailored to the geometry and biology of individual tumors. By delivering the therapeutic payload exactly where it's needed, the technology aims to improve efficacy while lowering toxicity, a long-standing goal in oncology. The work, published in the journal Pharmaceutical Research, is still at the preclinical stage, but it demonstrates how 3D printing is moving beyond prototyping gadgets and into the creation of functional medical implants. It's the kind of incremental but meaningful advance that can slowly shift treatment paradigms when scaled and refined. Another clever technological step is giving researchers a dramatically faster look inside living cells without the usual multi-step sample preparation that slows everything down. At Cedars-Sinai, a team has created a single-injection multi-omics analysis technique that works by direct infusion, essentially allowing them to pull detailed molecular information from one tiny sample in a matter of minutes. From that single injection, the method can detect more than 1,300 proteins and over 9,000 distinct molecular features, all within under 5 minutes. The approach, which they call SEMAD, was recently published in Enjointe Chimie. Compared with traditional proteomics and metabolomics workflows that can take hours or days and require several separate instruments, this represents a striking leap in speed. Faster doesn't automatically mean better, but in this case, the speed preserves more of the fragile, short-lived molecular signals that normally degrade during lengthy preparation. That could accelerate everything from basic cell biology research to the development of rapid diagnostic tools that might one day inform real-time clinical decisions. The technique doesn't replace all existing methods, but it adds a powerful new option to the toolkit. From seeing the inner workings of cells more clearly, it feels natural to turn toward one of the deepest open questions in science, the nature of consciousness itself. Most of us were taught, at least implicitly, that consciousness is simply an emergent property the brain produces, something like software running on neural hardware. Yet Christoph Koch's recent reflections push against that comfortable picture by insisting we confront what philosophers call the hard problem. Why does any of this information processing come with subjective experience at all? Why isn't it all just dark inside, like a sophisticated but unconscious machine? As you sit listening to this right now, the precise boundary between measurable neural activity and the felt quality of awareness remains one of science's most stubborn mysteries. It reaches into physics, into reports of unexpected clarity during near-death experiences, and into the strange lucidity some people show in final moments of life. Even the most rigorous neuroscience keeps bumping into phenomena that resist being fully explained by a purely brain-generated model. Koch's willingness to follow the data wherever it leads, even when it challenges materialist assumptions, is a good example of intellectual courage in a field that can sometimes feel dogmatic. A practical takeaway is to stay alert for carefully designed experiments testing ideas like integrated information theory or certain quantum-inspired models of consciousness. Any genuine progress there could quietly reshape how we approach anesthesia, disorders of consciousness, coma recovery, and even the long-term question of artificial sentience. It's the kind of foundational work that doesn't make headlines every week, but slowly changes the background assumptions of many other fields. On a more practical materials front, scientists have proposed a fresh framework for studying how cracks grow in stressed materials, one that moves beyond the computationally exhausting practice of modeling every single atom. The new approach could lead to better predictions of how long components will last under real-world conditions, which matters enormously for everything from microelectronics to advanced sensors in harsh environments. Traditional atom-by-atom simulations require immense computing power and still struggle to scale up to the sizes that engineers actually use. This alternative method offers a more tractable route while still capturing the essential physics of crack propagation. Improved lifespan forecasts aren't glamorous, but they're the difference between a device that fails after 2 years and one that can be trusted for 20. Staying with materials science, researchers at KAUST have finally provided a clear, mechanistic explanation for a puzzling electrical effect that scientists and engineers have observed for years but never fully understood. The phenomenon occurs when water droplets contact hydrophobic surfaces, those water-repelling materials we use in everything from lab equipment to medical devices and industrial coatings. A small electrical charge builds up at the interface, sometimes strong enough to influence nearby chemistry or even trigger unwanted reactions. Despite being commonly seen in everyday lab work and large-scale processes, the exact reason for the charge generation remained murky. The KAUST team's detailed analysis, published in the journal Langmuir, maps out the molecular steps that lead to this charge separation. A clearer picture could influence the design of coatings, microfluidic systems, water harvesting technologies, and even certain biomedical implants where surface interactions matter. It's a lovely example of how even the simplest everyday interactions at material interfaces can still hold scientific surprises. A more speculative story comes from the stars, where the James Webb Space Telescope continues to return data that challenges our models of planet formation. Observations of a Jupiter-sized world called TOI 5205b reveal an atmosphere that is surprisingly poor in heavy elements, even less enriched than the relatively cool star it orbits. Astronomers have nicknamed it a forbidden exoplanet atmosphere because its composition doesn't fit comfortably inside current theories of how gas giants accumulate material from their protoplanetary disks. The finding suggests that some of our assumptions about where and how these massive planets form may need important revisions. Data like this is valuable precisely because it forces theorists back to the drawing board rather than simply confirming what we already thought we knew. Each anomalous world JWST reveals adds another data point to what is becoming a far more diverse planetary zoo than we imagined. Closer to home and back in the realm of medicine, Oregon State University scientists have developed lipid nanoparticles with a particularly clever dual purpose. These particles are designed to deliver genetic material directly into lung tumors, but the same nanoparticles also counteract the muscle wasting condition often associated with advanced cancer. By addressing both the primary tumor and one of its most debilitating systemic effects at the same time, the strategy tackles two serious problems with a single delivery vehicle. The work, described in the Journal of Controlled Release, represents an interesting example of biotechnology trying to think beyond simply killing cancer cells and toward improving overall patient outcomes. Such combined approaches won't replace every existing therapy, but they illustrate how sophisticated delivery systems are starting to match the complexity of the diseases they target. It's the kind of integrated thinking that feels increasingly necessary as we move toward more personalized and multi-pronged treatments. Before we wrap up, it's worth keeping an eye on how those high-temperature memory chips might move from promising lab prototypes toward practical deployment in the coming months and years. The gap between scientific proof of concept and reliable manufacturing is often where the hardest work happens, but the potential payoff in aerospace, energy, and exploration is substantial. That covers today's science and health news. If one of these stories sparked your curiosity, share it with someone who enjoys thinking about how the world works. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for listening. See you next time. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using ElevenLabs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.